The concert hall was shining with golden lights that evening. Every seat was taken, and people spoke in soft excitement waiting for the famous pianist to arrive. It was one of those nights that everyone in the city talked about for weeks. The air smelled of perfume, and the sound of laughter and conversation filled the room as the audience waited for the show to begin. Everyone knew the man they came to see was one of the greatest pianists alive, brilliant, proud, and confident in every step he took. Backstage, a young boy worked quietly. He was wearing simple clothes that looked a little worn out. His job was to clean the floor, carry cables, and make sure everything was ready before the show started. He didn't complain even though the work was tiring. He had always loved being near music, even if he couldn't afford to learn it properly. He often dreamed of sitting at a piano, touching the keys, and playing something beautiful that could reach people's hearts. But for now, he was just there to clean and help. As he worked, his eyes kept drifting toward the grand piano on the stage. It was large, black, and shining under the stage lights. It looked powerful, like it held secrets that only a few could understand. The boy couldn't stop himself from staring. Whenever he saw the piano, he felt something deep inside, as if it was calling to him. He waited until everyone had stepped away for a moment. Then carefully, he walked closer to the piano. He didn't plan to play, only to touch it once. He wanted to feel what real piano keys felt like. His fingers trembled as he placed them gently on the smooth surface. He pressed one key softly. The sound was soft but beautiful, echoing faintly through the empty hall. He pressed another, then another, and suddenly, a small melody came out, hesitant, unsure, but full of emotion. He didn't realize that someone was watching. The famous pianist had just walked in from backstage holding his jacket over his shoulder. He stopped when he saw the boy at the piano. His eyes narrowed and a small smirk formed on his face. "What do you think you're doing?" he said sharply. The boy jumped, his hands flying away from the keys. I'm sorry, sir," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to?" the pianist interrupted. He laughed, but there was no warmth in his laughter. "Do you think this is a toy? That piano costs more than your whole life, boy." The boy's cheeks burned red. He lowered his head, wishing he could disappear. He wanted to say something, maybe explain that he loved music, that he didn't mean any harm, but no words came out. The pianist stepped closer, his voice filled with arrogance. "Maybe you should stick to cleaning floors. Leave the music to people who actually understand it." Some of the crew nearby heard his words and laughed quietly, not wanting to upset the pianist. The boy took a step back, nodding. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry." His voice was small, barely a whisper. He turned away and went back to his work, pretending not to care. But inside his heart felt heavy, as if someone had taken away something precious. The pianist looked satisfied. He adjusted his jacket and walked toward the stage. He didn't think twice about what he said. To him, it was just another moment of showing his superiority. He was used to people admiring him, afraid of him. And tonight, like every night, he planned to remind everyone why he was famous. The rehearsal began shortly after. The lights dimmed, and the sound of the piano filled the hall. Every note was perfect, every movement precise. The pianist was talented, there was no doubt about that. His fingers moved fast and smooth, never missing a beat. But as he played, there was something missing in the sound. It was impressive, yes, but it didn't touch the heart. It was like a beautiful painting without color, technically perfect but emotionless. The boy, cleaning quietly near the corner of the stage, couldn't help but listen. He admired the skill, but he felt that the music didn't have the warmth he dreamed of. He wished he could show what he felt when he touched those keys, even if only for a few seconds. When the rehearsal ended, the pianist snapped his fingers for someone to bring him water. He didn't even look at the people around him. The boy rushed forward, holding a bottle with both hands. "Here, sir," he said softly. The pianist took it without saying thank you. He drank a little, wiped his mouth with a cloth, and looked toward the boy again. "You still here?" he asked with a raised eyebrow. The boy nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I'm just cleaning up." The pianist smirked. "Good, keep doing that. You might not break anything that way." The boy forced a small smile, but his eyes lowered again. It wasn't the first time he'd been looked down on, but it still hurt. He finished his work silently while the pianist chatted with some people from the press. They laughed loudly, speaking about fame, awards, and how the concert would be a masterpiece. When the stage lights were turned off for a break, the boy stayed behind to check if anything else needed cleaning. The hall was empty now. The audience seats were dark, and only the moonlight came through the tall glass windows. The piano stood there quietly, almost waiting. The boy looked around, no one was there. His heart started beating faster. He stepped closer again, unable to resist. He sat down carefully on the bench. For a moment, he didn't move. His fingers hovered over the keys. Then, with a deep breath, he began to play. The melody started softly, like a whisper. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of feeling. The sound rose slowly, carrying something that words couldn't express. His hands moved faster, smoother, as if the piano understood him. The music filled the hall like a warm wind. It wasn't a practiced performance, it was a story, told through sound. A story of dreams, pain, and quiet hope. The boy closed his eyes and let his heart guide him. For those few minutes, he wasn't a cleaner or a helper. He was just a person who loved music more than anything. He didn't notice that a few people had stopped near the back of the hall. The sound technician, the stage manager, and one of the guards. They stood still, listening, amazed. None of them had ever heard anything like it. The boy's playing wasn't about skill, it was about emotion. It was real. When he finished, he sat still for a few seconds, his heart racing. The silence that followed was almost magical. Then he heard soft clapping from the back. He turned quickly, surprised and embarrassed. The stage manager smiled. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked. The boy stood up fast. I just taught myself," he said shyly, "at home, on an old keyboard that barely works." "You mean you never had a teacher?" she asked, surprised. He shook his head. "No, ma'am." The sound technician pulled out his phone. "That was unbelievable," he whispered. "I wish someone important heard that." But someone important had. The pianist had returned earlier than expected. He stood at the doorway, arms crossed, watching. His expression was unreadable at first, but then his smirk returned. "So this is what happens when you give a cleaning boy too much time," he said loudly. The others froze, unsure what to say. The boy turned around, his face pale. "I'm sorry, sir," he said quickly. "You didn't mean what?" The pianist interrupted. "Didn't mean to pretend you're a musician? Playing cheap tunes on my piano like it's a playground toy?" The boy stepped back, speechless. The pianist walked toward the piano and tapped one of the keys. "Music isn't for everyone, boy. It takes years, discipline, and talent, something you clearly don't have." The people nearby looked uncomfortable. No one dared to defend the boy. He stood there quietly, his hands trembling, his eyes full of unshed tears. The pianist gave a small laugh and turned away. "Clean this place up," he said over his shoulder. "The audience comes for real performances, not this nonsense." When he left, the hall felt colder. The boy didn't say a word. He sat on the bench again for a moment, touching the keys softly. The same piano that had made him feel alive now made him feel small. After a while, he stood up and went back to work, sweeping the floor in silence. But what he didn't know was that someone had recorded the moment when he played earlier, the way his music filled the hall with heart and beauty. That small recording, still hidden in a phone, would soon change everything, and though the boy didn't realize it yet, that night was not the end of his dream. It was only the beginning. The boy returned home that night feeling both heavy and restless. He had never imagined that touching a piano could lead to so much shame and ridicule. Even though the pianist's words had stung, a small spark inside him refused to die. He remembered the way the keys had felt under his fingers, the smooth black and white surfaces that seemed to hum with life. He remembered the melody that had flowed from him without effort, as if the music had been inside him all along, waiting to come out. That memory brought a quiet warmth to his heart, despite the embarrassment of being mocked in front of others. At home, he sat on the edge of his small bed, thinking about everything that had happened. His family lived in a tiny apartment with worn furniture and walls that had seen better days. He had a younger sibling who looked up to him with bright, innocent eyes. They asked questions about everything, and he often tried to answer with stories he had read or invented. But tonight he could not tell anyone about what had happened at the concert hall. How could he explain that he had almost touched greatness only to be told he did not belong? So he kept his secret and he stared at the floor, feeling both sadness and longing. Sleep did not come easily. His mind replayed the notes he had pressed, the sound that had risen like a quiet flame in the empty hall. He imagined the audience sitting in their seats waiting for music, and then hearing a melody that no one expected. He imagined the silence that followed, and the few people who had witnessed his performance. He wondered if anyone had truly understood what he had played. The thought gave him a strange mix of hope and anxiety. The next morning, he woke up early. He could not stop thinking about the piano. He had a small old keyboard at home, a gift from a distant relative who had long stopped playing. It was not much, with keys that sometimes stuck or made strange sounds, but it was enough. He sat down at the keyboard and tried to remember the melody from the night before. At first, his fingers fumbled. The keys did not feel the same. The sound was rough and the rhythm escaped him. But slowly, with patience, the music began to return. It was not perfect, but it was alive. Days passed, and the boy returned to his routine at the concert hall. He cleaned floors, arranged chairs, and carried cables. He did not touch the grand piano again, not in front of anyone. Yet every chance he got, when no one was looking, he would slip a few fingers onto the keys, letting the music inside him breathe. He practiced secretly, imagining the notes flowing through his heart instead of just his hands. The fear of being mocked still lingered, but it was no longer enough to stop him. One afternoon, while he was adjusting a microphone stand near the stage, he noticed something unusual. A small group of people had gathered in the empty hall, whispering to each other. Curious, he walked closer, careful not to draw attention. One of the crew members was showing a phone to the others, and on the screen, the boy saw a video of himself playing the piano during the previous night's rehearsal. He froze. That was him. He hadn't realized anyone had recorded it. The crew members' faces were filled with awe. "He plays like someone who's been trained for years," one of them whispered. Another nodded. "No, it's more than training. He's playing from his soul. Look at the way he moves. Look at the feeling in every note." The boy's heart raced. He had never imagined that anyone would notice, let alone be impressed. For the first time, he felt a mix of pride and fear. Pride because someone had seen the beauty he had created. Fear because he still remembered the pianist's mocking words. What if the famous pianist saw the video? What if he laughed even louder this time? He wanted to disappear. That evening, the pianist returned for a late rehearsal. The boy was carefully arranging the chairs in the front row when he saw the pianist's sharp eyes scanning the room. The boy froze, pretending to focus on his work. He tried not to look nervous, but it was impossible. Every movement felt clumsy, every breath too loud. He wondered if the pianist remembered him, if he would again remind him of his place. To the boy's surprise, the pianist did not approach him immediately. Instead, he went straight to the stage and began to play. The notes were strong, controlled, and precise. The pianist's fingers flew over the keys and the music filled the hall. The boy stopped working and listened quietly. He could see the skill, the years of practice, the talent that had made this man famous. But there was still something missing. The warmth, the emotion that made music live in people's hearts. As the pianist continued, the boy's mind wandered back to the video. He remembered the expressions on the faces of the crew members who had watched him play. He wondered if the music he played could ever touch people the way the pianist's technique impressed them. He wanted to believe that it could, but he was unsure. When the rehearsal ended, the pianist left the stage, satisfied with his performance. The boy was about to return to his duties when one of the crew members approached him. "Do you know this video is being shared online?" the person asked quietly. The boy shook his head. "I don't know how. Someone must have recorded it without me noticing." The crew member smiled. "It's beautiful. People are talking about it. People are saying this boy has a gift. You need to see it." The boy felt a lump in his throat. He did not feel like a gift. He felt small, humble, and unsure. Still, he followed the crew member to a small office where they could watch the video on a larger screen. As the video played, the boy watched himself, his fingers moving over the keys, the melody rising and falling, the notes carrying emotion he had not realized anyone could hear. He felt a strange sensation, pride, fear, wonder, and a little hope all mixed together. He realized that the music he played was not just for him. It had reached someone else. It had touched hearts even if he had never intended it to. The next few days were different. The video spread quietly at first, shared by music enthusiasts and people who worked in the industry. Some recognized his talent immediately. Others were amazed that someone so young, so humble, could create such beautiful sound. Comments ranged from admiration to disbelief. Some people said that he must have been trained secretly, while others simply marveled at the pure emotion in his playing. Meanwhile, the boy continued his work at the concert hall. He tried to act as if nothing had changed, but the whispers, the smiles, and the occasional nod from the crew reminded him that the world had begun to notice him. He felt both nervous and excited. He wanted to run away and hide, but he also wanted to play again, to let the music speak for him. One evening, when the hall was empty, he returned to the grand piano. His hands hovered over the keys, and he hesitated. What if the pianist returned and mocked him again? What if he ruined everything? But the music inside him was stronger than his fear. He began to play. This time, he played not only for himself, but for the idea that someone, somewhere, would hear and feel what he felt. As the notes filled the hall, he noticed something extraordinary. His fingers moved with confidence, his heart guiding every sound. The melody carried both joy and sorrow, hope and longing. He realized that music was more than just notes. It was a bridge between people, a language that spoke without words. He felt alive in a way he had never felt before, as if the piano and he were one. Unbeknownst to him, the pianist had returned unexpectedly. He stood in the doorway listening silently. At first he did not move. He was used to being the center of attention, to being admired for his skill. But now, as he heard the boy play, something shifted inside him. The music was different from what he was used to. There was no arrogance, no showmanship, only truth. It was raw, simple, and breathtaking. The pianist did not laugh. He did not scoff. He simply stood there, watching and listening. For the first time, he felt a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and something he had long forgotten: humility. He realized that the boy was not pretending, not showing off, not trying to be someone he was not. He was simply expressing himself, and the music was more powerful because of that honesty. The boy finished playing and looked up, startled to see the famous pianist standing silently in the doorway. He felt his stomach tighten. Was he going to mock him again? Say that he had no right to touch the piano? The boy opened his mouth to apologize, but no words came. The pianist finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "You play differently," he said. "I have never heard someone express themselves like that." The boy blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. I'm sorry, sir. I don't want to intrude," he said softly. "You are not intruding," the pianist said, shaking his head. "Keep playing. Play as you feel. There is power in that, more than I can teach in all my years." The boy's heart raced. He nodded, but he was too stunned to speak. For the first time, someone whose opinion mattered had not mocked him. Instead, he had been acknowledged, not for skill alone, but for the truth in his music. That night, the boy returned home filled with new hope. He realized that talent was not just about fame or recognition. It was about expression, about courage, and about sharing something from the heart. The journey ahead would not be easy, but he knew that he could play, and that the world might one day listen. The small spark inside him, which had almost been extinguished by ridicule, was now burning brighter than ever, and somewhere in the quiet corners of the concert hall and beyond, the music of a humble boy began to leave its mark on the world. The next day, the boy woke up feeling a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. The memory of the pianist's words from the night before echoed in his mind. "Keep playing. Play as you feel. There is power in that." For the first time, someone he respected had recognized the truth in his music, not just his technical skill, but he also knew the world could be harsh and pride could be cruel. He wondered what would happen if others found out about the video of him playing. Would people accept it? Would they laugh like the famous pianist had done before? He went about his morning routine quietly. The sun was soft and warm as it streamed through the small windows of his home. He helped his sibling get ready for school and packed a simple breakfast for both of them. Even in these ordinary moments, the memory of the piano lingered in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he could hear the keys beneath his fingers, the melody rising and falling, carrying a feeling that was impossible to describe in words. By afternoon, the boy returned to the concert hall for his usual tasks. He swept the floors, carried chairs, and arranged cables, all while trying to act as though nothing had changed. Yet a sense of anticipation seemed to hover in the air. People whispered softly when they passed by him, glancing at him with curiosity and quiet admiration. The video of him playing had started circulating quietly online, and word was beginning to spread. He tried to ignore it, focusing on his work, but the tension in the hall was palpable. That evening, the famous pianist arrived earlier than expected for a rehearsal. The boy was placing chairs in neat rows near the stage when he noticed the pianist's sharp eyes scanning the room. He froze for a moment, pretending to be busy with the chairs even though his heart was pounding. The pianist did not approach him immediately. Instead, he moved toward the grand piano, his movements confident and controlled. The boy tried not to listen, but the sound of the pianist's fingers striking the keys reached him no matter what he did. The pianist played a piece with all the skill and precision that had made him famous. Each note was perfect, but the boy noticed the absence of something he had always felt in his own playing: emotion. The pianist's music was technically brilliant, but it lacked the warmth that made a melody linger in someone's heart. The boy paused for a moment, brushing dust from the floor, and wondered if this was what the world admired more: skill without feeling, show without meaning. As the rehearsal continued, a small group of people gathered near the back of the hall. Some of the crew members whispered about the video of the boy playing. They had shared it quietly with a few trusted friends, and the reaction had been overwhelming. "He plays from his heart," one whispered. "I've never heard anything like it. This boy isn't just talented, he's extraordinary." The boy's stomach tightened as he listened. Part of him wanted to run and hide. He was just a humble assistant, someone who cleaned floors and carried cables. How could people expect him to perform on a stage meant for trained musicians? He tried to focus on his chores, but he could not escape the feeling that something was about to change. After the rehearsal, the hall emptied slowly. The lights dimmed, and the boy was finishing up his work near the stage when he heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned and saw the pianist standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. The boy froze, unsure what to do. Should he apologize for being there? Should he leave? The pianist stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the boy. "I heard about the video," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. The boy's heart skipped a beat. I didn't mean to," he began, but the pianist raised a hand to stop him. "I'm not here to scold you," he said. "I want to see if what I heard is true." The boy blinked, confused. "See if it's true?" he asked softly. "Yes," the pianist replied. "They say you play with your heart, not just your hands. That's something rare. Show me." The boy hesitated. He had never performed for anyone like this before. Not on a real stage, and certainly not for a man whose talent and reputation overshadowed everyone else. Fear and doubt surged through him. What if he failed? What if he embarrassed himself? But then he remembered the words the pianist had spoken the night before. There is power in that. He took a deep breath and nodded. Slowly, he walked to the piano and sat on the bench. His hands trembled slightly as they hovered over the keys. The hall was empty, yet it felt vast, echoing with expectation. He closed his eyes for a moment and imagined the melody he had played in secret the night before. It came to him naturally, flowing from memory and feeling rather than practice. He began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but as he continued, they grew stronger and more confident. The melody rose and fell like a gentle wave, carrying emotion and meaning in every movement. Each note seemed to speak of something deeper than skill alone, a story of hope, struggle, and quiet perseverance. The boy's fingers moved with a confidence that surprised even him, guided by the music in his heart. The pianist watched silently. His expression softened as the boy played, and for the first time he did not feel superiority or pride. Instead, he felt awe. The music was pure, simple, and full of life. It was not about impressing anyone or showing off. It was about truth, honesty, and connection. The boy's melody filled the hall, echoing off the walls and settling in the hearts of anyone who might hear it. When the boy finished, the hall was silent for a moment. He opened his eyes and saw the pianist still standing there, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. The boy's heart raced, unsure if he had succeeded. He expected another scolding, another wave of mockery, but the pianist did not speak immediately. He took a slow step forward and placed a hand on the piano. "You play differently," the pianist said finally. His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. "I have never heard anyone express themselves like that. Not with my students, not with anyone I've taught or admired." The boy's eyes widened. I'm not a trained musician," he said softly. I play because I love it." "That is exactly why it is remarkable," the pianist replied. "Talent alone does not create something like that. You have something far more important: heart, courage, and truth. Do not let anyone take that from you, not even me." The boy felt a rush of emotions: relief, pride, and disbelief. He had never been praised like this before, especially not by someone he had admired and feared. He nodded, almost unable to speak. The pianist smiled faintly and stepped back. "You will have opportunities," the pianist said, "but you must decide if you are ready. Talent without patience can be wasted. Remember, what you played tonight is not about fame. It is about connection. Never forget that." The boy nodded again, his mind swirling. He realized that this was more than encouragement, it was a turning point. The pianist had acknowledged him not just as someone who could play notes, but as someone who could create music that moved people. For the first time, he felt that maybe his dream was not as impossible as he had believed. In the following days, the atmosphere at the concert hall changed subtly. People whispered about the boy's talent with quiet admiration. The video continued to spread, shared among music lovers who were amazed by the depth and honesty of his performance. He remained humble, continuing his work as usual, but he carried a new sense of purpose inside him. Every time he passed the grand piano, he felt a connection stronger than before, as if it was inviting him to play again. He began to practice more intentionally on his small keyboard at home. Each day he worked not just to play the notes correctly, but to express emotion, to tell a story through sound. He experimented with melodies, rhythms, and harmonies, learning through trial and error. Slowly, his confidence grew. He realized that music was not something that belonged only to those with formal training. It was something that came from within, nurtured by passion, dedication, and honesty. The pianist, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about the boy. He had encountered many talented musicians in his life, but very few had touched him in the way this young assistant had. There was something raw, pure, and unpolished in the boy's playing, yet it spoke more truth than decades of technique could. He found himself revisiting the hall, watching from a distance as the boy practiced, fascinated by the sincerity in every note. Word of the boy's talent began to reach others as well. Musicians, critics, and even concert organizers took notice. Some approached him discreetly, offering encouragement and advice. Others simply observed from afar, curious about the young boy who had captured hearts without fame, wealth, or training. The boy felt overwhelmed by the attention, but he remained grounded. He remembered the words of the pianist and the feeling he had experienced when playing purely for himself. He knew that his music had to remain honest no matter what recognition came his way. One evening, after a long day of cleaning and organizing at the hall, the boy sat alone at the grand piano. The hall was silent, the lights dimmed and the air filled with the faint scent of polished wood and stage curtains. He placed his hands on the keys, closed his eyes, and let the music flow. The melody rose and fell, gentle and powerful at the same time, carrying the story of his journey, the fear, the ridicule, the secret practice, and the quiet determination that had brought him here. As the notes filled the hall, he realized that this was only the beginning. The world was slowly. The day of the big concert arrived, and the air was electric with excitement. People lined the streets outside the hall, their voices full of chatter about the performance they were about to witness. The city had been buzzing for weeks, everyone eager to see the famous pianist perform. Tickets were sold out, the lights were shining bright, and the orchestra was tuning their instruments backstage. For most people, it was just another night of music, brilliance, and grandeur. But for one small boy, it was a night that would change everything. Backstage, the boy moved quietly, making sure the hall was prepared. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the final details. He had rehearsed on his small keyboard at home countless times, but now, with the audience waiting outside and the grand piano under the stage lights, his nerves were stronger than ever. He reminded himself to breathe, to focus on the music and not on the audience or the famous pianist. Deep down, he knew that the music had to come from his heart, just as it always had. The pianist arrived early, as he always did, striding into the hall with confidence and pride. He glanced at the boy with a smirk, clearly remembering the times he had mocked him before. "Are you ready to sweep the floor and carry chairs?" he asked loudly, laughing. The audience wouldn't hear it, but the boy could feel the weight of the words pressing down on him. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that his worth was not determined by someone else's arrogance. The concert began, and the pianist played with precision and skill. His fingers flew across the keys, producing notes that were flawless but cold. The audience admired his talent, applauding each technical move, each perfectly timed chord. But the boy noticed the same thing he had noticed before. The music, though perfect, lacked feeling. It impressed the eyes but did not touch the soul. When it was time for a short break, the pianist left the stage, speaking briefly with the conductor and the other musicians. The boy stayed near the grand piano, carefully polishing it, though he couldn't resist glancing at the keys. They seemed to call to him, inviting him to play. He hesitated, remembering the mocking words from before, but also recalling the encouragement he had received when the pianist had heard him play secretly. He felt a quiet determination building inside him. No one expected the boy to play, yet a small crew member whispered to the pianist, "Sir, the video." "People are saying he's extraordinary. Maybe we should let him play." The pianist laughed. "Let him? A cleaning boy play in front of hundreds of people? That will be a disaster." He shook his head, clearly amused. "But if it entertains you to see a child embarrassed, I suppose I can allow it. Just a short piece." The boy's stomach tightened. He had never imagined performing in front of an audience this large, especially not after being ridiculed. His hands trembled slightly as he walked to the piano. He felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, even though the hall was still quiet during the break. He tried to calm himself, to focus only on the keys, only on the melody he had played so many times in secret. The pianist watched him closely, his smirk fading slightly. He was curious, perhaps even skeptical. He wanted to see if the boy's talent was real, or just a fluke captured in a video. The lights dimmed slightly, and the audience began to return to their seats, unaware of what was about to happen. The boy sat down on the piano bench. His fingers hovered above the keys. For a moment, nothing moved. His heart pounded and his breath came in shallow bursts. He could feel the eyes of the pianist, the crew, and the slowly returning audience on him. Yet he tried to block it out. He closed his eyes and let the memory of the melody guide him. The first note was soft, hesitant, almost fragile. It floated through the hall, catching in the air like a gentle breeze. The boy's fingers moved slowly, carefully, feeling each key with sensitivity and care. He imagined the story behind the music, his small struggles, the secret nights spent practicing, the desire to share something real. The melody began to grow, rising and falling naturally, as if the piano itself were alive. As he continued, the music became stronger and more confident. Each note carried emotion, telling a story without words. It spoke of hope, of perseverance, of dreams that refused to be silenced. The audience, returning from the break, began to notice the change in atmosphere. The sound was different from anything they had heard that evening. It was not about skill or showmanship. It was about truth and feeling. People stopped talking, letting the music reach them fully. The pianist, watching silently, felt something he had not felt in years: humility. His fingers were capable of incredible speed, his technique flawless. Yet he realized that he had long forgotten how to make music that truly touched hearts. Here was a boy, humble and untrained, playing not for applause, not for recognition, but for the love of the music itself. And it was beautiful. The boy's eyes remained closed. He was lost in the melody, unaware of the effect he was having. His fingers danced across the keys, sometimes gently, sometimes with urgency, as if each note were a piece of his soul being shared with the world. The audience remained silent, mesmerized. Even the stage crew, who had seen him practice secretly, felt tears prick their eyes. The music was more than skill. It was honesty, raw and unpolished, yet perfect in its emotion. Minutes passed, though it felt like an eternity. The boy played with all his heart, pouring every bit of his being into the melody. The grand piano seemed to respond to him, its sound rich and warm, filling the entire hall with a beauty that could not be contained. The audience was held captive, every person sitting upright, every ear tuned to the extraordinary sound. When the final note faded, there was a moment of silence so complete that it felt almost sacred. The boy opened his eyes, blinking, unsure of what had happened. The audience was still, as if they were too stunned to react. Then slowly the first claps began, tentative, soft, and then growing louder and stronger. Soon the entire hall was filled with applause, standing ovation after standing ovation. The boy felt a rush of disbelief and pride, but also a sense of humility. He had done nothing but play what he felt, and yet it had touched hundreds of hearts. The pianist approached him slowly, his face no longer smug, but thoughtful. "I misjudged you," he said quietly. I thought this was foolishness, a child pretending to be something he was not. But what you just played, that was music from the soul. Something I have not heard in a very long time. The boy's hands shook slightly as he stepped back. I didn't mean to, he began. You did not need to mean to, the pianist interrupted gently. It was real, and that is all that matters. The audience continued clapping, some wiping tears from their eyes. People whispered among themselves, amazed that someone so young, so humble, could produce such music. The boy looked around, still overwhelmed, realizing that the world was seeing him in a completely new light. For the first time, he felt that his dream was within reach. The ridicule, the fear, and the doubt of the past days melted away in the glow of this moment. He had played with honesty, courage, and love, and that had been enough. More than enough. After the applause died down, the pianist offered his hand. Come, he said. There is much we can do together. But remember this, always play from your heart. Never let anyone take that away. The boy nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and excitement. He realized that this was only the beginning, that his journey was just starting. He had faced fear, mockery, and doubt, and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever. That night, as the concert hall emptied and the city lights sparkled outside, the boy walked home slowly, carrying the memory of the music he had shared. The melody would remain with him forever, a reminder of courage, honesty, and the power of following one's heart. And somewhere in that grand hall, the echo of his playing lingered, promising a future filled with possibility and hope. The next morning, the boy woke up with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The memory of last night's performance still lingered in his mind. He had played with all his heart, and the audience had responded in ways he could never have imagined. Yet he also knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, and not everyone would understand him or support him. Still, a quiet determination had settled inside him, a determination to follow the music wherever it would lead him. He spent the morning practicing on his small keyboard at home, repeating the melody that had captured so many hearts. Each note felt different today, as if it had grown stronger overnight. The boy felt that something had shifted within him. He realized that the music he created was not just a personal expression. It had the power to move others, to inspire and to touch lives in ways words could not. The thought made him both humble and proud. Meanwhile, news of the boy's performance had begun to spread. People who had been at the concert told their friends, who told others, and soon the video of his playing reached a much larger audience. Social media and online forums buzzed with admiration and disbelief. Who is this boy? People asked. How can someone so young and humble play with such depth? Music enthusiasts and professionals alike marveled at the beauty and emotion of his performance. The boy was becoming known not for fame or appearance, but for the truth in his music. Back at the concert hall, the atmosphere had changed as well. The crew, the stage managers, and even the musicians whispered about the boy. Some had already begun to see him differently. No longer was he just the assistant who cleaned floors and carried cables. He was someone with talent, someone with a gift that could not be ignored. The pianist, too, could not stop thinking about him. He had seen many students and performers, but few had affected him the way this boy had. The sincerity, the emotion, the courage. It was unlike anything he had encountered in years. That evening, the boy returned to the hall early. He walked slowly to the grand piano, feeling both awe and reverence. The hall was empty, and the soft lighting cast shadows across the polished floor. The piano seemed to wait for him, as if it knew he had something important to share. He placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The melody flowed naturally, as it always had, but tonight he felt something deeper. He was not just playing a tune, he was telling a story. He was speaking through the music about hope, about resilience, about the courage it takes to follow one's dreams despite doubt and fear. As he played, footsteps echoed softly behind him. He didn't stop, though he felt a presence. Slowly, he turned his head and saw the famous pianist standing at the doorway. His expression was serious, yet there was something different in his eyes. Respect, curiosity, and perhaps even admiration. The boy swallowed nervously. He had played for the pianist before, but never like this. This time he was sharing his heart fully, without hesitation or fear. The pianist watched silently as the boy continued. The music filled the hall, carrying every emotion the boy had felt over the past weeks. The fear, The ridicule, the late-night practices, the quiet moments of joy and discovery. The pianist, who had always valued technical perfection and control, felt something stir inside him that he had almost forgotten. The true power of music to connect people, to move hearts beyond what words could do. When the boy finished, the hall was silent for a long moment. He looked at the pianist, unsure what to expect. To his surprise, the pianist stepped forward and clapped softly. Then he clapped again, louder this time. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. "You have something rare, a gift that cannot be taught. You play with honesty, with courage, and with feeling. That is something I have rarely seen." The boy felt a warmth spread through him. For the first time, he was being recognized not for skill alone, but for the heart he put into his music. He nodded humbly, unable to find the right words. "Thank you, sir," he whispered. I just play what I feel." "That is enough," the pianist said. "Never forget that. Skill can be learned. Talent can be improved. But honesty in music, that is something precious. Guard it carefully." As word of the boy's performance spread further, invitations began to arrive. Music schools, local orchestras, and even international competitions took notice. They wanted to hear the boy play, to see if the magic in the video and live performance could be repeated. But the boy remained humble. He did not seek fame or applause. He simply wanted to play music, to express what he felt and to share it with others in a way that was genuine and meaningful. His family noticed the change in him too. They could see the confidence growing in his posture, the quiet determination in his eyes. They encouraged him but also reminded him to stay grounded. "Remember who you are," they said. "Stay kind, stay humble, and never let success change the goodness in your heart." The boy nodded, understanding that recognition was a gift, not a guarantee, and that staying true to himself was more important than any applause or award. Days turned into weeks, and the boy continued his practice, both on his small keyboard at home and on the grand piano at the hall when he had the chance. Each session was a journey, an exploration of emotion, technique, and expression. He experimented with new melodies, tried different rhythms, and allowed his heart to guide his fingers. The music became more than a hobby. It became a part of him, a way to communicate without words, a language that could reach anyone who listened. The pianist became a mentor of sorts, though not in the traditional sense. He offered guidance, advice, and insight when needed, but he never forced the boy to follow strict rules or techniques. Instead, he encouraged him to find his own path, to explore the music that came from his heart rather than simply following instructions. It was a different kind of teaching, one that emphasized honesty and creativity over perfection. One evening, after a long day of practice and preparation for an upcoming recital, the boy sat at the grand piano alone. The hall was empty, the lights dimmed, and the silence was thick. He placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The melody was gentle at first, then grew in strength and depth. Each note carried a story. Each chord expressed emotion, and each pause spoke of reflection and understanding. He felt completely absorbed in the music, as if nothing else in the world existed except the sound beneath his fingers. When he finished, he sat quietly, breathing deeply. The hall remained still for a few moments, holding on to the echo of his playing. Then softly from the doorway, the pianist appeared. "You are growing stronger," he said quietly. "Your music touches people in ways I cannot explain. That is a rare gift. Never lose it." The boy smiled, feeling a sense of calm and purpose. He realized that the journey was not about proving himself to others or seeking validation. It was about the music itself, about the connection it created, and about the courage it took to express what was inside him. The applause, the recognition, and the invitations were only a reflection of the truth in his playing, not the goal itself. In the weeks that followed, the boy's life began to change in small but meaningful ways. He continued his work at the hall, but now people treated him with respect. Crew members greeted him warmly, musicians nodded with appreciation, and even the pianist's colleagues began to take notice. The boy's humility and dedication inspired those around him. He was no longer just the assistant who cleaned floors. He was someone whose music had the power to move hearts and touch lives. The video of his first performance continued to circulate online, shared and admired by people from around the world. Comments ranged from amazement to encouragement, with many expressing hope and inspiration from the boy's journey. People marveled at the fact that someone so young and humble could produce music that was so deep, so emotional and so real. It became a story not just of talent but of courage, perseverance, and the importance of following one's heart. One evening after a long day at the hall, the boy sat at home with his family. They talked quietly, sharing meals and laughter, but the boy's mind wandered back to the piano. He realized that the journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more opportunities, and more moments where fear and doubt might creep in. But he also knew that he was ready. He had found his voice, his courage, and his purpose, and no matter what lay ahead, he would continue to play, to express, and to touch hearts through the music that lived inside him. As he drifted to sleep that night, the boy felt a sense of peace. The journey had begun, and he knew that it would continue, full of challenges, discoveries, and moments of beauty. He understood that the power of music was not in the applause, the fame, or the recognition, but in its ability to connect, inspire, and express the truth of the heart. And in that quiet understanding, he felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The boy awoke early that morning with a sense of quiet excitement. He could feel the weight of what had begun to unfold over the past weeks. His life had already changed in ways he had never imagined, yet the journey was far from over. Invitations to perform were coming from near and far, and the world seemed eager to see the humble boy who had captured hearts with his music. But for him, it was not about fame or recognition. It was about the music itself, the melody that had grown inside him, carrying every hope, fear, and dream he had ever held. He ate a simple breakfast with his family, the routine comforting and grounding. His younger sibling looked at him with wide eyes, still curious and admiring, unaware of all the attention the boy was receiving. They laughed together, shared small stories, and for a moment, life felt completely ordinary. Yet in his heart, the boy felt extraordinary. He understood that the ordinary and the extraordinary could exist together, and that music was the bridge between the two. The concert hall called to him once again. That afternoon he arrived early, carrying his sense of purpose with him. The crew greeted him with quiet smiles, and the musicians who had previously only nodded politely now acknowledged him with a subtle respect. Even the pianist who had once mocked him approached with a rare smile. "Are you ready?" the pianist asked. "Tonight is your night, not mine. Play as you feel. Nothing else matters." The boy nodded, his stomach tightening with nerves and anticipation. He had played in front of people before, but tonight felt different. It was not a rehearsal, and it was not a quiet hall during a break. Tonight, the audience would be full, eager, and attentive. Their eyes and ears would be upon him, and he knew that every note mattered. But he also knew that fear could not control him anymore. He had faced mockery, doubt, and embarrassment, and he had survived. Now he could focus on the music alone. The hall slowly filled with people. The chatter quieted as the lights dimmed, and the boy stepped toward the grand piano. He felt the polished wood beneath his fingertips and let the weight of it ground him. The audience waited expectantly, and he closed his eyes for a brief moment. In that instant, he remembered all the times he had practiced secretly, all the nights he had dreamed of this moment, and all the music that had grown inside him without needing anyone's permission. He began to play. The first notes were gentle, carrying a vulnerability that immediately captured the audience's attention. As the melody grew, the music became stronger, filled with emotion and life. Each note told a story, the story of a boy who had faced ridicule, who had practiced in secret, who had believed in something no one else could see. The hall seemed to hold its breath as the boy's fingers moved across the keys, weaving a tapestry of sound that was at once delicate and powerful. The audience was silent, entranced. They could feel the truth in the music, the honesty of the boy's expression. There were no grand flourishes meant to impress, no technical displays to showcase skill alone. Every note carried meaning, every pause was deliberate, and every chord resonated with the depth of someone who had lived through struggle and discovery. People whispered to themselves, amazed that someone so young and humble could produce something so profound. The pianist watched from the side of the stage, unable to hide his admiration. He had spent years perfecting technique, teaching students, and performing for audiences. Yet he realized that something in the boy's music went beyond technical skill. It was raw, emotional, and alive. He had been humbled, reminded that music was not merely about precision, but about connection, about truth, and about the courage to express what lay within. As the boy continued, he felt a wave of freedom wash over him. The music was no longer about fear or expectation. It was about joy, sorrow, hope, and everything in between. He was telling his story through sound, and for the first time, he realized that the audience was not just listening, they were feeling. Tears welled up in the eyes of some, smiles spread across others, and quiet nods of understanding moved through the crowd. The boy's hands flew over the keys with confidence and grace. The melody rose and fell, telling stories of triumph and struggle, of quiet nights spent practicing alone, of dreams held tightly against the world's doubt. He played with a freedom and authenticity that he had never known before. It was no longer about proving himself or earning approval. It was about giving the music its life and letting it speak through him. When the final notes faded into the stillness of the hall, there was a moment of complete silence. The audience sat, holding their breath as if they could not believe what they had just experienced. Then, slowly, applause began. At first it was soft, hesitant, almost reverent. Then it grew louder, stronger, filling the hall with a roar of appreciation. Standing ovation followed. Standing ovation. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, moved not just by talent, but by the courage and honesty that had brought the music to life. The boy sat at the piano, his hands still on the keys, feeling a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and overwhelming joy. He had done it. He had shared his heart through music, and the world had listened. The weight of doubt, the memory of ridicule, and the fear of failure had all melted away, replaced by a quiet certainty that this was his path, and he would follow it with honesty and courage. The pianist approached him once more, his expression serious but warm. "I was wrong to mock you," he said quietly. "I see now that your gift is extraordinary, not because of skill alone, but because of your heart. Remember this always. True music comes from honesty. Never lose that, and nothing can stop you." The boy nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Thank you," he whispered. I will never forget what you said." Word of the boy's performance spread even further. People from other cities, countries, and even continents learned about the humble boy who had played with such honesty and depth. Invitations poured in, from music schools, festivals, and international stages. But the boy remained grounded. He understood that recognition was a byproduct, not a goal. His focus remained on the music itself, on the stories he could tell, and on the emotions he could convey. Back at home, his family celebrated quietly. They were proud, yet they reminded him to remain humble and kind. They knew that life could be unpredictable, and they wanted him to remember that his worth was not measured by applause or fame, but by the goodness and honesty he carried in his heart. The boy nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had been given an opportunity, but he knew that true success would come only if he stayed true to himself. As weeks turned into months, the boy continued to grow. He played at more concerts, taught himself new techniques, and experimented with compositions that reflected his unique voice. He remained humble, always willing to help others, always encouraging those who struggled as he had once struggled. People admired him not just for his music, but for his character, his kindness, and the courage that shone through every note he played. The pianist remained a mentor and friend. He guided the boy when asked, offering insight and advice, but never imposing his own style. He had learned from the boy as much as the boy had learned from him. The famous pianist realized that humility, honesty, and courage were far more powerful than technical perfection alone. He had been reminded that greatness was not measured only by skill, but by the ability to touch hearts. One quiet evening, after a long day of practice, the boy sat at the grand piano alone. The hall was empty, the lights dimmed, and the silence was thick with anticipation. He placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The melody was familiar yet different. It carried the experiences of his journey, the lessons he had learned, and the hope he held for the future. Each note seemed to rise from his heart, filling the hall with a warmth that was impossible to ignore. As the music flowed, the boy felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that his journey had been about more than mastering the piano. It had been about courage, perseverance, and the power of honesty. It had been about believing in himself when no one else did, about facing ridicule without letting it define him, and about sharing the music that lived within him. When the final note faded, he sat in silence for a moment, savoring the piece. He knew that the road ahead would not always be easy. There would be challenges, doubts, and critics. But he also knew that he had found something greater than applause or recognition. He had found his voice, his courage, and the ability to connect with the world through music. And that, he realized, was the greatest gift of all. The boy stood, looked at the grand piano one last time, and smiled. The journey had begun in secret, in quiet moments at home, and in the empty hall. It had grown through fear, ridicule, and doubt, and had blossomed into something extraordinary. He knew that the music would continue to guide him, inspire him, and carry him forward. And as he left the hall that night, the echo of his melody lingered, a promise of hope, courage, and the power of following one's heart.